Whether you keep them in your home or love to see them in theirs, these are the creatures that bring us all together.
Reptiles. We're going to be delving into the experiences of reptile lovers from around the block and around the world. This is the Reptile Talk Podcast. What's going on, everybody? This is Jeremy Turgeon from Brassman Reptiles.
And this is Rob, and I'm Creeping It Real. And I'm super pumped tonight because we have a very special guest with us. We got Trace Hardin from Hardin Herpetoculture here. Woo! How are you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We are doing great. I'm super excited to have you on, man, and just super excited to get into it. So I know you kind of bridge the gap. You're a little bit into a little bit of everything, it feels like, and so I wanted to kind of start off with, I know you keep a little bit of arachnids, you do some amphibians, you got some snakes and stuff like that. So what really got you like super into, was there any specific species that like got you interested in keeping like, you know, quote unquote exotic animals?
I think I was always like a bug guy over everything else. Like, reptiles, like the vast majority of my collection is reptiles, and mostly like boas and pythons and stuff like that. Love them to death, but like, man, there's nothing cooler than like giant beetles and walking sticks and like, awesome tarantulas, stuff like that, And Rob, if I'm not mistaken, like, I think you and I, like, we've never met, but like, I know we know each other from like the Arachnoboard forum, and, like Pet Bug forum and all that stuff from like when we were kids.
A million years ago.
So, yeah, man. So it's like, it's great to finally like, actually talk to you. And Jeremy, I listened to both your guys' episodes. Great stuff so far.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
We're trying to have some fun.
Sorry.
No, it's cool.
I talk a lot. So
no, that's cool, man.
I'm down with that.
I was at that Tinley that you got the name, the Brassman Reptiles, man.
You were there, dude?
I was there. I was at that at the
auction.
Oh, what is it? The bidding auction.
Yeah.
Yeah, great stuff, man.
That's awesome, dude.
That's crazy.
I think I was probably seeing you bid on things, like shaking my head like this guy.
Oh my God! What is he doing right now?
Dude, that's what happens when beers are $3.
Yeah, man. Like, I've kind of stopped drinking at those auctions because it's like all of a sudden I'm like $500. Like, oh man.
Yep.
Yeah. Dude, when I woke up with a slight hangover and I don't want to talk about how many $1,000 withdrawal from that credit card. Woo!
Oh man.
Oh my God. See, I was kind of a bug kid too, because like when I was little, my mom kept tarantulas as opposed to like other pets. So like when she would clean the enclosures, it was just like pink toes and red knees and stuff, Avicularia and Brachypelma. So she would just like let me hold them. So like when I was a little kid, I'd walk around with a pink toe tarantula climbing all over me, and I was just always super into the tarantulas. And when I did science fair when I was a kid, I would bring in my tarantulas and feed them there, and we got to watch it and stuff. And so like I vibe with that. Like when I started out with arachnids, I didn't have any reptiles when I was growing up. But then expanding, once you go outside of the realm of getting a couple tarantulas, then you get some other stuff. And I mean, you've got some amazing animals. Like I see all the pictures and the videos you post, like your Kaiser newts, and I'm like, oh man, those things are so amazing.
And there's just the diversity in the world, and like just being into all creepy crawlies. It's like I can really appreciate all of this stuff. So super into amphibians. And it's nice. I've got that like scatterbrain. I like to bounce around when I get too much of the Kaiser newts. I'm trying to breed them this year, and so now they're done breeding. I didn't get any eggs this year, so I'm super bummed. So now it's like, all right, well now I'll go focus on tarantulas or something.
Yeah. And then you just got some carpet python eggs recently too, right?
I did, yeah. I got 3 clutches of carpets.
Yes.
Awesome. Real nice jungles.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I've got some extraordinary ectotherm bloodlines from my friend Will Bird.
Oh yeah, Will Bird.
And that actually and then I've got some from Derek Roddy down in South Florida, who does mostly blackhead pythons. But killer bloodlines of jungles.
Dude,
but that actually kind of taking a little bit step back, like Will Bird, I guess we could, I actually volunteered at the Louisville Zoo when I was a kid. Like my mom knew that I was into tarantulas and weird bugs and stuff like that. And same as you, Rob, like I think the first exotic pet I got, I convinced my parents to let me get a Madagascar hissing, air quotes, beetle, because I knew I couldn't say the word cockroach.
Because they didn't want to tell the parents that it's a roach.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, come on, guys, you really failed at 12-year-olds trying to buy exotic pets here. But so I convinced my dad to take me to the pet store, and it's a pet store not too far from my house. It was one of the biggest exotic pet stores, I think, in Kentucky. I actually started working there when I was 14. This is a few years before then. I was like a pet store fly. I was just always there.
Yep.
This place was called Pets Palace in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's still around. They moved from where they were originally, but it's still around.
Yeah.
But my dad let me get a hissing cockroach, Madagascar hissing cockroach, and at the time I didn't know that you could sex them so easily. The males have the horns on their pronotum. I got a female, and they're live bearers, and like I'm an idiot kid. And, like, dude, my room was full of like little cockroaches in no time.
Oh my god!
Everywhere. I always had like praying mantis, utheka hatching, and like dude, it was just it's like just a true testament to my parents, because like I've even lost. I had 15 years old or so, had Scolopendra gigantea, because this was back like when Peru imports were still available.
Yeah.
And man, it got out, and like my dad saw it on the floor. It had been out for days.
Oh my god!
I had to tell my parents, and my dad saw it on the floor and thought it was a toy and went to go pick it up.
Dude.
And it moved.
Oh my god!
Dude. Yeah, dude. Like he yelled, yelled at me. And I was like, "Oh man, it's fine.
It's cool. It's cool."
So I learned pretty early on, like, dude, I don't have the mindset to keep dangerous, herps or dangerous inverts. Like, I so often just walk away from cages with doors open. So
I'm stressed out right now.
If I had kids, I think that might be the line. Like, I'm cool with a lot of different things, but if you lost a 10-inch centipede in the house, nope.
Sorry, I literally just had the chills. I'm like looking at my floor very intently right now. Oh, it's going to be a hard night to sleep.
I love those Scolopendra, man, but they're like, God, they just teleport. They're just like,
they're so quick.
Out of their exhibits. They're squirrely little guys. So.
Oh my god. So you had like a lot of you kept some invertebrates and stuff when you were younger. Was there anything that like really just like caught, like any specific species that really just caught your attention and like drew you in to them in particular?
No, I think it was mostly just like diversity more than anything else. I was really into like collecting insects and keeping all kinds of weird insects in my room. And like, honestly, I've given this like a lot of thought. I think that I'm just fascinated with like husbandry.
Yeah.
Like I come from a family of like agriculture people and farmers and cattle farmers and stuff like that. And I think that like being a suburban kid with access to like a really cool creek and like, I'd get tons of like Plepidon salamanders back there and just all kinds of cool stuff around, my little suburban house. I think I was just into keeping things like alive and like kind of like people get like an innate love when they're gardening or when they're keeping house plants. Like that's just, my brain is just like obsessed with figuring out the best way to keep these and just really appreciating them, and like having that connection with nature, but then also like maybe an element of farming. Like, is that, is that in our DNA? There's a line of like doctors. Is that in their DNA? To
do that.
Want to be or is it just confirmation bias or like support group? I don't know, but like I've wondered like why have I for the last 20 years had lugged all over the country like hundreds of snakes and hundreds of tarantulas. Like, what am I doing? But I can't imagine a world without it,
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I feel that. And like when I was younger, I would catch snakes and stuff. I wasn't allowed to keep snakes in my house because my dad's terrified of snakes.
Yeah.
But when I would catch stuff, some of them I would bring back to my house, and I had like a big metal wash basin, and I would set up a layer of substrate. I'd set up hides in there, and I'd set up like a little environment for them. And my goal when I had them for the several hours or a day that I had them was to get them to eat. And when I could get stuff to eat, like little pieces of earthworm or any little bugs that I could put in there, I was like so ecstatic. The first time I got a ringneck snake to eat while it was like in my care, I was like over the moon. I was so ecstatic, man. I was so excited.
Yeah. No, that's like, I totally get it. Like I remember like the first time I saw dragonfly naiads, the like larval form, or the nymphs that live in the water.
Yes.
They have like a alien, like a xenomorph. You know that movie?
That
Alien?
look,
They have, like,
yes.
Yeah, man, like I remember being a little kid and seeing one of those eat a little gambusia guppy fish, like a mosquito fish.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind. Like, I just like, stuff like that. It's just so fascinating. It's just in your backyard, you know?
Right.
Right.
There's this whole world there.
Yeah, for sure. So, so I guess I had just a diversity of things. I grew up with like just, my room was always 80 degrees and I had tons of reptiles and my mom knew that I was super into this, so at 13 she enrolled me at the Louisville Zoo in their volunteer program. I did that until I was 18, until I went off to college. And I did that, and I also worked at that exotic pet store down the street from me. I started working there from 14 until I went off to college. And so while I was there, at the pet store, they had like Carusia zebrata. They had, this was late 90s, so they had like it was when the ball python craze was really turning up, and so they had like we had racks of ball python. This was like back before, this is late 90s. Like for a pet store to have racks of ball pythons, like it was pretty cool. They had
for sure.
Yeah, it was a really fun place to work and really sharpen my teeth on like naturalist knowledge and captive husbandry. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So that place, you said they had things like the prehensile tailed skinks, and those are a species that like used to be fairly common in the trade, and now they're like super scarce. And going from seeing those sort of things, and then getting to work with stuff in the zoo setting, was there like ever a conflict between being in the zoo and then working in the retail or the public side of things, or were they like they're oh, you're a kid, it's no big deal?
Well, yeah, and so no, there really wasn't a big deal. I think like coincidentally, Will Bird actually worked at that pet store. He's a little bit older than me. He was a zookeeper at the Louisville Zoo that like really took me under his wing and cool. Fostered like, hey, this nerdy kid is like super into this. And he actually worked at that pet store also. So there's no real conflict of interest. I think that zoos realize sometimes when they are hiring, particularly like ectotherm people and aquarist people, some of the best hires are pet store people. I didn't have a degree when I started working at the Omaha Zoo, so I'm gonna like kind of flash forward a little bit here. I guess I'll give a quick backstory. Is that cool? Or?
Go for it. Sure.
Yeah, so I worked at the pet store and the Louisville Zoo until I was 18, and then went off to college at Murray State University, which is in Western Kentucky, kind of like Bible Belt, small college town. And I had been working like this job at the pet store, like all the time, as many hours as I could. I didn't really like authority, and so when I went to this little college, like they wouldn't let me drive my car on campus, and I was this entitled little kid. I was an entitled kid that like hadn't really had a parents. Like I did whatever I wanted. Now like, who is this college that I'm
telling you?
Telling me,
right?
Yeah. So actually, I had been dating a girl for a while, not long enough to say, hey, like let's get out of here. Like let's get married.
Yeah.
The only way we can actually get off campus, live off campus, and keep reptiles and stuff. And she wanted her dog was to get married. And so we're like, let's just do it. So we didn't even like tell her parents. We just eloped. We went to the courthouse. And like 18 years later, man, I'm still living with her. Like she's still my wife.
Hell,
that's awesome.
Yeah, man, it worked out really well. She's not an animal person, but she's definitely like a logistics email. Usually when you email Hardin Herpetologica, like you're talking to Shar, I'm dictating things to her. But so anyway, I don't mean to keep going on these side tangents.
No, man,
no, it's cool.
It is all cool. So you had just moved out, and you had picked up a couple different animals to get kind of back into keeping.
Yeah. Started building the collection back up, and then knew that I wanted to work in the zoo field. Started applying to zookeeper jobs all over the country, and got an interview with Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo in Nebraska. And so my wife and I drove, out west, furthest west we had ever been at 18, 19 years old.
Wow.
And like, I guess I didn't know what to expect. Like Omaha is just kind of like, I don't know. Like here I am, this Kentucky kid. It's like Omaha, what's out in Nebraska? They're gonna have like like
Flat.
goats or something. Like I had no idea what to expect. Dude, this zoo is like it's constantly or consistently voted like one of the top 5 zoos in the world. Like it's unreal. Like if anyone is listening is ever traveling through Omaha or anything, like stop at the zoo. Like the herp collection, they have like they can rattle off like they have the largest indoor desert and the largest nocturnal exhibit, and they have just so much. Omaha has just so much money, and there's so many donors, and there's like Warren Buffett is from there and stuff like that. So
that's so
and I
cool.
think it's just really cold there a lot, so people really like the zoo is like their lifeline. And it was just so started there at like 19. So
that's awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it was a great job. I worked there for 10 years. But I mean, I don't mean to derail. If you had, I could just start talking about zoo stuff, but like,
no, it's
I'm
all
cool with
good,
that.
man.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Okay.
I don't have any experience working at zoos, so I mean, it's always I'm always interested in hearing what it's like, behind the scenes and that sort of stuff.
For sure. So I started the Omaha Zoo in like 2005. Now I was a young guy, and it was like one of the best jobs you could ever have all through your 20s. And like definitely if you can make things work, I would love to still work at the zoo. But like I mean, that's like one of the big things is the zoos usually don't pay that well because it's like such a high demand job. Like every college kid wants to come out and immediately do a zoo thing. Yeah. And so even at, almost 10 years in at the zoo, I was like, out of 250 employees, one of the longest person there. And that's such a shame because, zoos really like hemorrhage that institutional knowledge. But now, like when I was leaving the zoo, a lot more like the new director was coming in and really bringing in a lot more money and like really trying to keep people around. And like zoos today are like light years ahead of what they were even like, a decade or two ago, like as far as conservation and treating their keepers very well. Like it's a really good time now. I mean, unless I guess you're working for Joe Exotic.
Oh man.
I'm sure, like everybody's had to make a Tiger King reference. Huh?
Yeah. Did you catch the beginning of the Scott Borden interview?
I know, I heard him say it. I was like, damn it, that was my material.
Oh, man. I think Rob and I have said the phrase, that bitch Carol Baskins, probably 1,000 times since we've watched it.
A couple times.
Well, I'm sure you guys saw Tom Crutchfield and everybody in that first scene. I've been in that trailer.
Me too.
Like,
we were just down there a month ago.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I was like, I saw that. I was like, oh, my God, that's so cool. That's Tom. And then I was like, oh my God, we're about to watch a show about like I was like, this is all gonna be horrible.
Reptile crazy people.
Like, yeah, I was like, oh no.
Yeah, I was about to like take out a notebook and start naming all the people I recognize.
Yeah, seriously.
Oh, it's so pumped. It was it's great documentary. But anyway, so Zoo World, it was great. I started with as a reptile keeper, part-time mammal. And so the zoo is divided by like habitat and zoogeographical regions and exhibits. Yeah. So instead of like, the bear house or whatever, they really wanted to do more of like like geography. Yeah. So it'd be like the
South
Desert
America.
Dome.
Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. So I worked in the Desert Dome, which was underneath the largest geodesic dome. So it's like this giant, snow globe over top of a huge desert. It was awesome, man. And cool. You walk in, 3 different desert biotypes. So you have Namibia from South Africa, or in South Africa, Southern Africa. And then you wind into Australia, the Red Center Desert of Australia, and then you wind into the Sonoran Desert here in the United States and into Mexico.
That's so cool.
And like, I mean, the herp diversity there, man. Like we had, in Namibia, we had Cape Cobras, Najanivia, Spitalops, those little coral cobras, the Biberon snakes, like puff adders, like just, and like phenomenal specimens too. And we get to tail those guys out. Australia had taipan, so like the taipans were real fun to work. Yeah, and then into Sonora, you have, I think they have the largest rattlesnake exhibit in the United States also.
Man.
And it's like this huge walk-in exhibit, man, and it's full of rattlesnakes. And so you have to like have a keeper stand on the outside and like point them out to you, and like you have to count them, and you know they're all microchipped, so you have to like every time you feed them, you have to microchip and pull them. It was some.
Well, you sold me.
Animals.
I need to visit because they
yeah,
got that many
seriously.
rattlesnakes.
Seriously.
Yeah, it was great. And then around, let's see, I spent a few years doing reptile crew and mammal crew. We had a giant nocturnal exhibit, so I worked with all kinds of nocturnal herps. Well, as we know, most herps are nocturnal. This exhibit was underneath the desert dome. It was in the basement, and it's on a reverse light cycle.
That's
so like
awesome.
at our nighttime, all their lights are on. So the guests during the day are walking around, and all these animals have black lights and red lights.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's
yeah, it was really neat. So like they had Madagascar Fusa there that I worked with. Those are like those giant weasels that eat lemurs. Like just awesome stuff. Tons of bats, like big fruit bats that you get to work with.
That's incredible.
Some alligators. It was fascinating. They had these alligators in Omaha, Nebraska, and like we had 12 of them. And we were one of the first zoos to really like delve into training back in like 2000, early 2000s. And so like we were one of the first zoos to show that like these alligators would know their names. They come up on command. Like you guys have seen that. I think you guys went to Gatorland, some cool alligator places down in Florida.
Yep.
But like for, you know, to see that, I guess in complete in situ or, you know, in captivity in a basement where these animals are, you know, underground almost their entire lives. Like it was neat to see that. It was neat to see that they would still go through breeding cycles even though they didn't see the sunlight because they're in this huge indoor swamp with like fluorescent light, you know, all the proper husbandry and everything, of course, but like they would still go into the females would still, you know, go in estrus or whatever it is for reptiles, and the males would still bellow in the spring, you know, like even though they were underground, they knew when it was breeding season. Like they're so linked to that cycle. It was just it's fascinating to see all of this natural behaviors. And
that's so
that
cool.
really is awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and I guess around 2008. So I worked with reptiles and amphibians for a while. 2008, we decided to open a butterfly and insect pavilion, and so like I knew it was like, God, I already have like hundreds of spiders at home. You know, like, I've got them a shoe in to work in this place. So I was the lead entomologist from 2008 until like 2014 or 15, and it was a giant free flight butterfly exhibit. We did lots of tarantulas. We had like 50 exhibits of tarantulas and all kinds of like. That's the coolest thing is, as you guys, I should say, I'll segue a little bit ahead. I now work for the United States Department of Agriculture as an entomologist.
Yeah.
And so
that's awesome.
That's kind of when I was working for the Butterfly and Insect Pavilion, we were able to work with all of these quarantine significant insects, like these insects that could be deemed pests.
Yeah.
So, Rob, as you might know, and a lot of the really cool invertebrates are actually illegal because, you know, the United States, our natural resources, agriculture and forestry, and like it's $1 trillion entity, you know, like enterprise. So like we can't really risk that for weirdos that want to keep want to keep beetles and stuff like me.
And giant land snails and stuff.
Precisely. Like I saw giant land snails in the wild in Hawaii last year, and I was just geeking out so hard. Like they're monsters.
They're
like,
so cool.
Yeah, so it was eating a cigarette butt.
What?
Oh my God.
I was like, no wonder these things are like pests. Like in South Florida, they've been introduced, and the Department of Agriculture has actually been trying to eradicate these things because they'll just eat anything, and they get football size. They'll literally eat the stucco
right off the houses.
Walls.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And like in some neighborhoods, they're so infested, and I think we've pretty much eradicated them. It's been a big program, but during the heat of the infestation, like in some neighborhoods, you could just straight up smell. It smelled like snails.
Wow.
Like there's so many of them. The air outside just smelled like African land snail. Like, yeah. So
you smell
was my
that?
opportunity to work with all
Snail.
these crazy bugs. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I did that for quite a while and traveled. I was able to do a lot of international travel and conservation work and work with a lot of endangered invertebrates. And I did a lot of amphibian conservation work with amphibians that I was able to cross over my love of amphibians with my love of invertebrates because amphibians eat invertebrates.
Yes,
that's true.
So
That's very
like,
true.
I went to Panama. They have a amphibian rescue center in Panama. It's run by the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, and I think at the time it was run by, I think Houston Zoo, and they were basically collecting. This is amphibians are kind of imperiled right now.
Yes.
There's a risk of 2/3 of all amphibians or even more going extinct, like very soon, like, within just a few decades. And for an entire, clade of organisms to die, that's like dinosaur level stuff, like,
Yeah, that's
and
crazy.
it's all because of habitat change and global climate change, but also this invasive fungus that's mobile. It's called chytrid fungus. I'm sure you guys are familiar.
Yep.
So the zoo really got like heavy into amphibian conservation, and we got a lot of endowments and grants, and like we sent keepers, to other countries to learn about these animals in other countries and help collect them in other countries for zoos in those countries, and bring them into captivity. So there's an assurance population in captivity because these things are just going extinct. Like, I mean, they're just like, this fungus is just marching across the forest floor. So, so I got to do a lot with amphibian conservation in Panama and Honduras, and
So we can't talk about amphibians without talking about giant salamanders because, dude, I geeked out. I was freaking out.
It was quite the experience. And it's like, that's one of those bucket list things. I've got like a handful of things. Yeah, I mean, I've got an infinite number of bucket lists, right? Like, it's like, I'll just add that to the bucket list.
But the amphibian bucket list.
Yeah. So last November, we traveled to Japan and Korea, my wife and brother-in-law and I, and we have some family in Korea, so we were able to see some family and then spent some time, about a week in Japan, and to take a step back, like, the Japanese giant salamander is probably one of my favorite animals. I mean, these things are just these ancient, giant salamanders that are fully aquatic. They can get almost 100 pounds. I think like some Chinese species, that Andrias, to be honest, can get that big. Amazing. Like, they're just monsters, man. They're
so
just monsters. They're very similar to our hellbenders here in the United States. They're Cryptobranchidae, but they're just huge. And so when I worked at the Omaha Zoo in the nocturnal exhibit, we actually had a giant salamander on exhibit. His name was Little Sumio, and so like the water was freezing freaking cold, and like he was my animal, and I'd jump in the water with him and like, hand feed him trout. Like,
that's
he was
awesome.
Just awesome. He got up to 70 pounds and 50 inches when I left.
Holy moly.
Yeah, man. So like a 4-foot salamander is pretty cool.
Dude,
that's amazing.
That's a monitor lizard.
Yes.
Like,
just a lot slower and dumber, But so his name was Little Sumio, named after one of the world researchers on Japanese giant salamander, Dr. Sumio Okada. Dr. Sumio Okada had come out to the United States and done a lot of presentations, and he helped facilitate us bringing in these Japanese giant salamanders. And so I knew I kind of had a connection. And like, unfortunately, the Japanese government does not fund research on like wildlife, or I'm sure I have that slightly off, but they don't have like a fish and wildlife where they can like really put a lot of money towards conservation and biology. And I'm hesitating saying this was what they were telling me while I was in Japan. But yeah, so I was able to. Dr. Sumio actually, like, he leads tours because he's like, look, he monitors the largest population of Japanese giant salamanders. He's been doing it for years, like I think over a decade or two. And he's radio tagged them all, microchipped them all. So he has them all named. There's over 700 in these waterways and these rivers and these streams and stuff.
Wow.
And so he already goes out regularly and like collects them to measure them and weigh them and get biometric data and see which ones he hasn't seen for a while. Like he goes out there basically herping for giant salamanders. So like,
that's cool.
He'll bring people along, like enthusiastic people. So it was such a great experience. We flew into Osaka, Japan, and then took a bullet train out east, just on the other side of Hiroshima. It's this little city called Nichinan, and it's basically like this little country, picturesque, like Japanese, countryside. Like it's up kind of a mountain, It's just it was so crazy. And the craziest thing is Japan, like the population is really pyramiding. So this like small town out in the country, like the population was really it was an elderly population. So many people are moving into the city. Like Tokyo is like one of the densest places in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like tons of houses that are just empty in this like, and it's like beautiful, like it's just, the mean population there, I think the mean age population there is like 80 or something like that. It's crazy. So it's just like there's no one out there in these, country villages and up in the mountains and stuff. It's just, you wouldn't think that in Japan. I assume there's going to be, kind of more like this, like suburban, like the United States, but it wasn't. And so yeah, we went out and met up with the guy that leads the tours with Dr. Okada. His name's Richard Pierce. And if anybody's interested, you can check out their website, bushidojapan.com, or just Google, giant salamander, Japanese giant salamander tour or whatever. And I got to have dinner with them, like, because the population is so pyramiding, the wild boars are becoming like a real problem in the city. And like, these giant wild boars are like running amok. They're like raccoons here, Wow. And so we had dinner of wild boar, hot stew with like, mushrooms and stuff like wild collected mushrooms. And it was crazy. And then we went out herping, and found, so we walked in this stream, like a backyard stream, man. The water at the deepest was maybe knee deep. And it was my wife, my brother-in-law, myself, and then a photographer and the doctor and Richard. And like, we walked and walked and walked. It was night. We were all wearing chest waders, in this shallow, street-sized stream. And then, I was kind of getting nervous. I was like, man, if I traveled around the world to see this one thing, we've been walking for like an hour. I was like, I might be real upset, because we got to catch a train like tomorrow morning, to get out of this city, go back to Tokyo. So,
right.
And then finally, like, my light landed on one, and we've all had that moment, like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, for sure.
Slipped into the stream and fell in the water. It was like the greatest experience. Splashing. And it was the first one we found. He had not seen it for 2 years.
Wow.
And so it was like, so he's like, oh, this is, this one, we caught him up. I'm not allowed to touch them because they're revered in Japan.
Yeah.
So, I was able to kind of help, take notes and all that stuff, but it was just great to be around it, And
That's
we
awesome,
found 3
dude.
that night.
Just
I think
to
the
see
biggest
it.
one we found was, I think the biggest one we found was like 10-ish pounds, something like that, if I remember.
Wow.
12 pounds.
10-pound salamander, though. 10-pound salamander.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
That is so freaking cool.
And I'm sure you guys also know Japan is known for their beetle culture. Like,
Yes.
they are really into keeping beetles. So, like, I got to go to, like, beetle pet stores. Like, that was always a dream come true, is, like, going to a place where you can buy beetle larvae. Like, it's huge there. Like,
that's crazy.
They had a store, Global Insect, and all they stole, like, the entire store, it was just beetles. Like, it was just larvae. It was just rearing material. It was a really nice high-end store, too. And, like, stag beetles, Goliath beetles, fungus cultures to feed to your beetles.
Yes.
It was just so neat. Yeah, it was
Dude.
just, it's geeking out. It's just not something you can see here, unfortunately.
Yeah. See, when I was telling Jeremy about doing this interview, I was like, I need to ask him about that beetle store because it looks like the coolest thing ever.
Oh, man. Yeah, it was, it's like, oh, man, they have, like, those giant European stag beetles.
Oh, the elephants. I love them. Oh, my God.
That's awesome.
Elephant beetles, like, just so many cool things. So, like, I dragged my brother-in-law and wife there, and, like, they were, it was, like, going to your first reptile show with your parents,
Yes.
Like,
like, can we go now? You're like, but look at this thing.
I know. It was great. It was such a great experience. So, but, Japan and Korea was great. The year before that, I went to Vietnam and Cambodia, just then that was an amazing trip too. Lots of herps there, and but just the countryside too, and just seeing that, like, I'm finally to the age, and luckily don't have kids, so like,
right?
Yeah, it was exciting. Yeah, for sure. So you get a lot more freedoms with that.
Yeah. So what was like one of the coolest things that you found out there when you went on your other trip?
Oh, let's see. So yeah, as much as I loved Japan and Korea, I didn't get as much wildlife stuff as I would have wanted. 2 weeks we got to spend 4 or 5 days out on the countryside, like I said.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I saw some cool other stuff, 4-line rat snakes and stuff. But
cool.
That's cool.
Vietnam and Cambodia was almost all wild, and like I think my poor wife got dengue fever while we were there.
Oh man.
Like, yeah, we were like renting scooters and like road cruising at night, and like, it's just such experience. Like, Cambodia is like probably one of my favorite countries. I mean, it's just, there's a ton of wildlife there, and that's the country that has the huge temples, like the Angkor Wat temples and all that stuff, and just like seeing that, like, I kind of geek out about history and archaeology and stuff like that, ancient civilization stuff, and it's just like, holy crap! At one time, this was the most populous place in the world, and now it's like just rubbles and like crazy carvings and geckos running everywhere. Vietnam, we didn't discover, but we like found an old bunker, like where during the war, like this was on an island on the coast. They it's called Cat Ba Island. It was just full. It's like limestone-ish type island, and it's just full of these tunnels and stuff. And so like we found this hatch out in the middle of the jungle, herping. And we're like, oh, let's just jump down in this.
Yes.
So like, we jump down in this like hatch, and like, yeah, it's like this 5 foot. I'm a tall dude. It's like this 5 foot tall, like hallways and rooms and like side corridors, and it was like pitch black. It's been there forever, or been there for decades, I'm sure. But more geckos than I've ever seen. Like, I've never seen like communal mass nesting of geckos, and I think they were like gecko, like tokay geckos and stuff. Like, they're like house geckos, and like there was like this huge like wall of just like eggs where they had laid thousands of eggs on top of eggs on top of eggs. Like,
that's
just
incredible.
seeing that stuff like in an old bunker, it's like,
that's crazy.
What a world. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And then for people who've like worked with tokay geckos in captivity, that just sounds like a horror movie to me. It's like you go down there, all of a sudden you hear and you just look down the hallway, you're like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, could you imagine a chorus of that?
Just
like literally hundreds of geckos just calling at the same time. I might shit myself if I heard that like times 100.
Just all those little mouse traps.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like Saw. Do you want to play a game?
Yeah. Oof.
Oh my god, that is awesome. That's so incredible. And then like, have you gone to South America? I think you did some research in South America, right?
Yeah, so I've only been to South America once. I went to Colombia for a couple weeks, and that was just kind of a fun trip with the family and friends. So we went to Cartagena, and didn't see a whole lot of herps there, but saw pumpkin patch tarantula.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Yeah, man, they're communal.
That's like, exactly what I was going to bring up.
Yeah, like,
that's amazing.
At least I think, but like we were like flipping, coconut palm leaves, and there was just tons of them in there, like tons of tunnels, and they were all crisscrossed, and like it was a really neat experience. So we had to be like real careful peeling things up to look at all these all these pumpkin patch, and they were adults. So I guess like maybe an egg sac hatch there. I mean, whatever,
a family group or something.
Yeah, just so neat to see that. So neat to see cool bugs. I've done a lot of work in Central America. So Panama, I went to the Panama Amphibian Rescue Center, and I had kind of mentioned that earlier. I helped go down there to set up some insect colonies because they were buying their feeder insects and like field collecting their feeder insects, and we were so concerned about chytrid. We're like, maybe we should try and breed insects in house. So I went down there and brought just set up insect colonies, and unfortunately we couldn't take insects with us. So we were trying to collect insects to see if we could rear them in house. And I think it was pretty successful. We were able to start doing like columbella, the springtails.
Cool.
And then I repeated that project in Honduras. There's the Honduras Amphibian Rescue Center, and I went there in 2017 and spent a week seeing the natural habitat, a lot of these endangered amphibians up in the mountains of Casuco National Forest. So it's like outside of the main city of Honduras, San Pedro Sula. You take this truck and you just drive straight up a rainforest mountain for like like hours, man.
Yeah.
So it's like high elevation, like lots of cool vipers and stuff like that. It's like cool. Cold at night, The first night I was like, this is the tropics. I don't, I hung my hammock, and I wasn't indoors for like 7 days. We were out in the rainforest for 7 days. I hung my hammock up, and it gets cold.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, I had to make like a chimpanzee style nest of like all my dirty clothes and like backpack, just whatever I could pile on top of me in my hammock to stay warm. So yeah, that was a blast. And then we spent the next week at the site where they're actually, if you guys have ever seen, like they take shipping containers and retrofit shipping containers into laboratories, mobile laboratories.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
They like retrofitted like some 40-foot refrigerated shipping containers at the Omaha Zoo. And I was able to help, like we put the racks in there and 10-gallon tanks and ran electricity through it. And my good friend Brandon Greaves did a lot of that work. And then they shipped them down there to Honduras, 2 of them. And so
that's awesome.
we wanted to breed, invertebrates to feed to the assurance colonies of the amphibians. And we're working on like permitting now because they want to get local people to work there and like foster that relationship with these endangered amphibians.
That's awesome.
So I think that's like the process, and then they're going to start collecting these like some of these frogs that I was seeing, I was like, how are these not in the pet trade? They're endemic to this one mountaintop, and it's like they're the coolest. They're like twice the size of Australian dumpy tree frogs with like thumb frogs. They're beautiful. It's just like, oh my god, like we can't let this thing go extinct. There's maybe hundreds left, who knows,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so Honduras was so fun. So yeah, and then spent a week at low elevation at the site and kind of setting up insects colonies and doing a lot of herping around there. Found cat-eyed snakes and stuff like that.
That's cool.
That's really
super
cool.
Okay, so I have to try to test to see if the adage is true. It's a small world after all.
Yes.
Because you're into the amphibian scene. Do you know Mark Mandika at all?
Yeah. So I've not met Mark Mandika. I'm very familiar with him in the Amphibian Foundation.
Yep.
And like Tuffy the frog, and so I don't know him, but I'm very familiar with him.
That's cool. I work a little bit with the University of Massachusetts in their Digital Life 3D project. So I was working with Professor Urshik up there, and that was like right when they really were getting into doing all the 3D models of different amphibians and all that stuff. And Duncan had introduced me to Mark a little bit, and I was talking with him for a little while. And then we started nerding out about music because he's also a bass player. So he was like, yeah, you got to come down and like we'll jam and like play with frogs. And I'm like, I'm down with that.
100%.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, he's doing some cool stuff. So
yeah.
No. Yeah, the only amphibians I have now are, as Rob mentioned, those Kaiser newts. You guys seen those before? The Iranians. They're just so awesome, and they're so easy to keep, man. Like they're fully aquatic, and they just, like you can just basically ignore them. Like they just thrive on neglect. Like I just love it. So
yeah,
I mean, I think with most animals, as you guys know, if you set them up right and really know about their behavior and know what they want, and once you set up like a perfect balanced ecosystem, even in a terrarium, like it doesn't need a lot of tweaking,
Yep.
and like, I mean, if it's humming right, it's like, it's good. And then all of a sudden I'll have like a snail outbreak or algae bloom, and it's like, oh shit, I gotta
do
some
something.
Yeah. So.
Those are so cool, man. And so what sort of arachnids do you keep now?
Not a whole lot. I go back and forth. So, arachnid wise, I've got some Grammostola. I've got some Brachypelma.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a bunch of Pacilliferia. So they've listed the Pacilliferia, quite a few species on the Endangered Species Act, as you guys know.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some Ornata. I have two Ornata. Mother, she's probably one of the oldest animals I have in my collection. I think she's like 15.
Wow,
and then her daughter, I produced egg sacs last year, and I had about 200 Pacilliferia Ornata. And like, because they're on the Endangered Species Act, I took them to Daytona, and like Johnny Appleseed just handed them out to everyone, completely for free, because you could gift you can gift endangered species. So precisely. So it's like I just want to share the love and like share the genetic diversity of this awesome spider that unfortunately might be regulated into extinction. Like we need to just get these out here and just like get enthusiasts. So anyone that was interested, or any like kids that were super, kids that reminded me of me, I was like, here, take some weird spiders. So be careful.
Be careful with them. Don't get bit.
Be careful. Yeah. But so I've got a rack of tarantulas here, but I need to get back into it. It ebbs and flows. I'll get into tons of rainbow boas, and then get into this, and then get into frogs, over the years. So I'm starting to ramp the tarantula collection kind of back up again.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, that's pretty much how I've been. I got super into like true spiders for a little while, but they've got such a short lifespan, so it's like a year and a half or 2 years for some of the species I was keeping. So I was like, man, these things are growing so quick, and then all of a sudden, like, a year and a half goes by and they all start dying, and I'm like, no, but I love these things. They're so cool.
Yeah, what are you keeping, like heteropoda and like weird huntsmen and stuff?
Yep, exactly.
Man, those things scare the hell out. Those are like Scolopendra, but like not as leggy, man.
They're so cool.
Yeah, we got some like weird African ones when I was working at the Omaha Zoo, and I was feeding them, and I had them in not deli cups, but like Sterilite boxes, and so I had a bag of crickets, and I had like 100 of these weird red and green heteropoda. I don't even know if they were in that genus, but they were just those giant, huntsman spiders. They're beautiful, but like I opened one of the lids, man, and the thing like lunged at me like face hugger, like alien reference I've made tonight. Like I'm an entomologist, so I make a lot of like insect alien references. This thing like jumped at me like a face hugger, like at my face. I like screamed, and I like waved the cricket bag in front of my face, like I was just like, like fell backwards, fell on my ass, and like I like froze, man. I knew I was gonna feel this thing like running up my face or something, and I just like froze my eyes shut, like oh god, and like nothing. And so like I felt the cricket bag was like moving harder. Dude, when I waved the cricket bag, I accidentally netted him into the cricket bag, and he was like pushing, trying to get out. I was like, oh god, these need to be like 2-keeper rules.
Oh jeez.
You need to be careful with these things. Like,
they're so cool. They're super fast though. Like some of those species, I thought that like Poecilotheria were fast, and like some of the other tarantulas I'd work with, I thought those are fast. And then after I got some of the Holconia and Cygnus, the Australian huntsmans. Those things, those are fast, man.
Cool.
They make tarantulas look like they're moving in slow motion with how quick they can move.
That's awesome. So
I'm gonna stick to retics, guys. Big, slow-moving things I can see very easily.
I don't know, man. Retics scare the crap out of me. But are those Halconia insignias? Are those the ones that are like super communal? You can keep like big family groups?
No, those
like an Australian huntsman.
Yeah, those ones are. I actually have that species tattooed on me too.
Cool,
I can't even think of the name of it. The ones they use in arachnophobia.
Yeah.
They're called oh my goodness, I'm totally blanking on this right
Don't
now.
look at me, dude. I can't help you out on it.
It's a different.
It to me. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's
the communal. Are those in the United States?
No. They're called Avondale spiders is one of their common names.
Okay.
And they Delana cancerites. Those ones. They're a little bit smaller. Those are communal, and you can find those in like big groups. It's so weird.
Yeah.
They're like a huntsman spider. You think is like a nomadic spider, and it's not going to want to hang out with other nomadic spiders. But those ones will be communal. But the Holconia are individual species. They're kind of nomadic, and so. But man, they grow so fast, and they are just moving. They're incredibly quick. Like it's so cool. Like I used to be a little bit weary of them, and then I got some, and I was like, these things are like 4.5-inch leg span, giant huntsman spider. This is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. No, I like I really like true spiders, and I haven't kept them at home, but we kept a lot of cool true spiders at the zoo.
Yeah.
We did a lot of the weird Nephala, the giant web spinning spiders.
Yes.
So we have the Clavipes. I don't think it's in that genus anymore. We have the banana spider down in South Florida.
Yep.
But this genus of spider is like one of the widest spread genera in the world, because the spiderlings, as you know, like they balloon. And so they have just populated the tropics all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're all different. So we had Madagascar ones. And you guys may have seen the gold thread orb weaver from Madagascar. They actually wove like a blanket out of their silk in Madagascar. It's like this golden fleece basically.
That's
made
crazy.
From spider silk. But yeah, so we had those, and we had all kinds of salticids, the little jumping spiders. Those are so damn cute. I wish they were bigger, you know?
Yes. Yeah. If jumping spiders were like 2.5 or 3 inches, I'd be all about them. But the fact that they're half-inch, I'm like, I'm going to lose
it's such
you.
a bummer. They're so cool. They're so smart, man.
Yes.
Like, there's, you know, they can they'll target out, they've even figured out that they'll target mosquitoes that have had blood meals.
Yep.
Like if you put them in a chamber with like a bunch of mosquitoes, they'll look at the one like, oh, that one's got a bunch of blood in it. Like that's a gusher, and they'll pop up and grab that one. You know.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they're just so smart. Like that. I think you know, keeping animals in captivity, observing it's an honor to observe these behaviors and enriching these animals and seeing that stuff. That's what I really geek out about.
100%.
For sure. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. No, and I'm standing in my basement right now looking at my Monocentropus balfouri.
Yes,
I have
balfouri.
about 25 in a terrarium.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been pulling mature males out crazy. I've got 3 mature males. Do you know anyone that needs mature males?
I mean, I might need a mature. I'm pretty sure we got a mature female at the shop who's we've had her for a long time. But I'm pulling more males out every day. So if you're interested, shoot me a message and I'll send it up to you. Sweet. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's definitely something I'd be interested in, because ever since I saw the first pictures of people doing communal groups with balfouri, I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, how can you not want that? It's just they make this giant webs, and they've got all these tunnels, and they interact with one another. It's so cool.
Yeah. It's unreal. So I had a female, and I mean, Jeremy, these things are, big baboon tarantulas that have khaki abdomens and bright blue cephalothorax, bright blue heads and legs.
That's awesome.
And I had a female with an egg sac. She produced a couple dozen eggs, and I threw her an a Zilla front open habitat, and did a bunch of that excavator clay and stuff. And now 2 years later, I'm pulling mature males out. There's still dozens in this terrarium. It was so neat because the mom will run out and grab a bunch of prey items, and then the little babies will come out, the spiderlings will come out and climb all over and climb into her fangs and eat on the food that she's eating, the
That's
bola.
Crazy. Rob's showing me some photos right now. That's an amazing looking animal.
Yeah, they're neat, man. You should get into bugs.
maybe one day.
Screw those retics, man. Get
just think about how many tarantulas.
Get your blood pumping.
Yeah, just think about how many tarantulas you can keep in the space that you keep one retic. You can keep
Don't do that to me. You know I have an addictive personality when it comes to that kind of shit.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful. But yeah, so it's been. Now I'm with USDA. I've bounced around in the federal government, done a lot of invasive species work. So let's see, I left the zoo and moved down to Sarasota, Florida to work at the sterile insect release facility. And like this stuff is like so neat to me too. It's like these real novel ideas to either keep animals alive or figure out how to eradicate animals that are bad. You know, like there's this like yin and yang. And so like there's this horrible pest called the Mediterranean fruit fly. It's like one of the worst pests in the world. Like they have a huge host range. They're these big, like gross painted, well, they're not gross. I think they're really pretty, but they're painted winged flies, you know, thumbnail size, and they'll lay their eggs in anything, like any citrus fruit, any vegetable, any pepper, anything. And like, we got infected with them in like Florida in the early 1900s, and they had to cancel school and make school children go out and like put paper bags over every orange in groves to try and wipe out this fly. I mean, there's like, it's this horrible pest. And so we wiped it out, you know, I think in the mid 1900s, but we're so paranoid that it's going to come back, and it does occasionally come back in the United States. And so we'll like pinpoint where they'll come back, and like the population will explode. And so we have to go out there. One of the main ways we combat this fly is with integrated pest management by releasing sterilized males out of airplanes. And so if you have enough sterile males to outcompete a fertile male, since the fly only breeds once, you have 10 sterile males and one fertile male. Eventually, if you just keep doing it, you run your population out. Like you breed them out.
That's interesting.
Because insects, you know, you break that cycle once and it's over. And so like, you know, occasionally they'll pop up in Florida, occasionally they'll pop up in California, usually from people smuggling fruits and vegetables back from other countries. So all listeners, please don't bring your fruits and vegetables back because they might harbor some hitchhikers. And then it costs a lot of money to get rid of these things, and we don't want to like spray pesticides or anything like that. We want to try to figure out ways to combat these horrible pests without, you know, hurting the ecosystem or hurting agriculture or anything like that. So we released hundreds of pounds of flies. I mean, that's like millions of flies, 10 million flies a day out of airplanes. To come in Florida. So did that for a while, and then I worked, you know, there to make sure the fly doesn't get a foothold in the United States. You have to have a century program, so you have to hang traps, pheromone traps. And so like USDA, I mean, like for a naturalist and for a field herper or something like that, like you're just constantly looking for invasive insects, and like you're out in the forest and, you know, hanging beetle traps, you know, wood boring beetle traps and fly traps, and like, you know, getting to see cool snakes and stuff like that. Like it was such a great experience.
Yeah, we had a big issue in New England maybe 10 years ago now with Asian longhorn beetles. And they hung up posters everywhere. They're like, if you see them, you know, report it, and if you can catch one, catch it, and you got to save it so that they can document it and all this stuff, because they're so worried about them getting a stronghold up here. And they pushed that hard, and as far as I know, it got handled pretty well, because I haven't seen any like major advertisements for them being an issue in a couple of years.
Just like the giant African land snail, we're knocking that one back. The longhorn beetles. I think there's still some populations in the U.S. I think there's one in Ohio that they're working on getting rid of. It sucks because these longhorn beetles, these cerambycids, what they'll do is they'll lay their eggs in wood. The beetles will live in the wood, you know, and they basically kill trees because they live under the bark, and they'll wrap around the bark and girdle the bark and basically kill a tree in, you know, a year or two. Emerald ash borers do that. I think the cerambycids also do that too, the Asian longhorn beetles. But like if you move firewood, you know, if a tree dies because these beetles are infested in it, and it dies within a year or two, these are like 100-foot tall trees, you know, like these are huge trees in the city. Like these are thousands of dollars to safely have them removed. But people, you know, also these trees will fall out in suburbs and stuff, and people will then chop up the tree and then move the firewood, you know, to other states. And like we've even been able to, I think there was like a research paper that was able to map like NASCAR events. They could follow NASCAR
distribution
events with emerald ash borer breakouts, because a lot of NASCAR fans also camp, and like they drive to these big events. So like you have a flare up, you know. So so it's fascinating. Like when you get huge amounts of data and then what you can extrapolate from that data. And we have like, hundreds of people, thousands of people all over the country looking for invasive species and working to try to eradicate them and recording that data. And that's kind of what I do now. I work, it sucks. I'm no longer in the field. I'm now in front of a computer, but I'm assessing a lot of that data and like trying to write papers to our politicians, basically book reports on bugs to our politicians to be like, hey, look, like we might need $1 million to eradicate this pest, but like if we don't get it now and it gets a foothold here, it's going to be $1 billion program when it starts knocking trees down and trees fall on people's houses, and like these are bad. And it's happened, it's happened many times. So there's a lot of money going into this program so we could save money in the long run.
Right.
So, right now, I'm very excited. I'm working on this report on the largest hornet in the world, the Japanese giant hornet, Vespa mandarinia. It's like the size of your hand almost.
I've seen some videos. They're terrifying.
Yeah, they slaughter beehives.
Yep,
so
the
like
whole hive.
in the summer. Yeah, man, like a dozen will kill 30,000 bees. They're 4 times the size of bees.
Wow.
And so they'll just go in there and they just chop. They just decapitate bees, kill the entire hive in a matter of hours. And so like, bees, those are expensive, like, because beekeepers use those to pollinate crops and will travel all around the United States to pollinate crops. And so these hornets, like, they just got a foothold in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Washington State.
That's
and so
terrifying.
Like we just found out about them like this summer. It's public knowledge. Like there's lots of reports. So we're trying to alert the public. Like, let us know if you see any. In Washington, Pacific Northwest. We're trying to keep our ears out and eyes out for these new giant hornets. And oh man, they're just like, but they're just so cool too, because
so cool.
they're so neat, man. Like, so they kill European honeybees, like the European honeybees, they're just like cows to slaughter,
Wow.
And they just kill every bee in there and then pull all the larvae out, all the bee larvae, to take back to their larva because it's such a rich protein. But the Asian honeybee, a different species of honeybee, than Apis mellifera, Apis cerana, it might even be a subspecies, because they've lived with the Japanese giant hornet for, as long as they have. They've evolved this behavior where when the hornet comes to the beehive, the bees will all run into their beehive, and the hornet will enter the beehive, and they'll drop down on the bee and heat their bodies up by vibrating their bodies, like buzzing, and they'll all just grab this hornet, like dogpile this hornet, and they'll all just buzz their bodies and raise the temperature above the hornet's critical temperature, but 1 degree below their own critical temperature, and it will boil the hornets like in their exoskeleton.
Yes!
So, like, how
yes!
cool is that?
It's so cool. I saw a documentary of that, and I was like, that is so incredible.
That's insane.
Yeah, man. So they boil hornets, like, and they're just like, even some of the bees will die in the process, like, all
for the greater good.
Yeah.
That's
Along with the
amazing.
queen.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I mean, insects are great. Reptiles are great. We haven't even talked about reptiles hardly, guys. Like,
that's okay.
That's okay. You know what that means? We're just gonna have to have you on again sometime.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure. I could talk about rainbow boas. I've got like 30 or 40 rainbow boas, and Sumatrans and blood pythons, and tons of jungles and other Morelia. So, we'll have to do this again. This was a blast. And
this is
a
really good time.
Yeah, my wife's gonna be so happy because like you guys wore me out. Like I'm not gonna go and just bug her all night, talking her ear off. So.
That's awesome.
So before we wrap up, we usually I like to ask one question, just to kind of wind things down. So it doesn't have to be in your own collection. It could just be like in the greater, reptiles, amphibians, exotics, arachnids, any of that sort of stuff. Is there any project or anything that's going on in the reptile or arachnid community that's really got you excited, something that you're super interested in, that you are kind of looking forward to seeing what goes on with it?
Oh, man, like I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I get newly excited about things constantly. I think that as an invertebrate fanatic, I'm really enjoying watching the isopod thing really take off. And as a husbandry guy, I love this new world of bioactive substrate, and I've been doing it for a long time, and like I just thought it was, you know, being lazy and like, you know, kind of enjoying that, like that enrichment, you know. And
Yeah.
actually, as soon as I hang up with you, my neighbors down the street just raked a ton of magnolia leaves, and like those dummies left it on the curb to have the trash man take it. Like, I'm gonna run down there in the night and steal all their magnolia leaves
right into the enclosures.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'll wash them, and like the snakes love hiding in that stuff. And you know, the sterile, like, I'm really happy that as a community as whole, like we're I think trying to go more towards that like ginger batted and like reef keeper style, maybe European style of like mixed species displays, and like, you know, as long as they're properly set up, doing like springtails and weird isopod species, and like with your Brazilian rainbow boa and tons of leaf litter, and, you know, mixing it up, and of course spot cleaning, and of course doing big cage cleans. But like, I kept snakes for years on newspaper and paper towels, and they lived, they thrived. I bred them and had a lot of success with them. But like, the behaviors I'm seeing when you give a cage, you know, a foot deep of substrate, you know, of like mixed wood and coconut fiber and sphagnum moss and leaf litter, like, that's just so cool, you know. And
Hell
like,
yeah.
the animals are more fecunded, they're more enriched. You know, I don't have really any health problems at all with them. So yeah, so I guess just like that, as reptile keepers, we're evolving how we keep reptiles, and that's the most exciting thing to me. And like, yeah, I think, I guess, I don't know, I guess that's probably about it. Like, of course, I mean, we could just start naming species, like naming things. Like, I kind of, like, every once in a while, I just feel like I need to get a Pac-Man frog, and I have like,
dude,
like every
same.
couple years, I'm like, man, I need a Pac-Man frog. Like, I want a Pac-Man frog. So like right now, I have a Pac-Man frog bite. You know, I really want to get those cornuta, but
Yes. We actually just got some cornuta at the shop.
Ooh, you got any of those? Have you guys ever seen those really bright green ones?
We got some of those.
Yep.
Oh man, I might have to message you.
Yeah, we might have to do a little trade for.
Oh yeah. So I got a bunch of Sumatrans that are about to drop eggs here, like 4 gravid females now.
Boom.
So
That's awesome.
lots of Morelia eggs. So yeah, we can work something
We'll
out.
figure something out.
Oh yeah.
So if people want to find out more about you, where would they go to figure out what you're doing, or to find out more about you?
Yeah, so like us on Facebook, hardinherp.com, or Hardin Herpologica. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Actually, yeah, more Instagram. I think we share a lot of things to Facebook. And then also our website, hardinherp.com. And that's HARDIN, HERP, obviously. And then, you know, hardinherp.com.
Okay, so thank you so much, Trace, for coming and checking things out. We really appreciate you coming.
Most definitely.
And, you know, donating your time, and we definitely have to have you back on the show again.
Yes.
Yeah, man, this was a blast. This was really fun. So feel free to reach out anytime, and we can chat about some other cool stuff.
Hell
Sweet.
to the yeah.
Thank you so much, dude.
Have a nice night.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.